Welcome. I'm Ann Steffen. I'm a faculty member at the University of Missouri St. Louis, and I'm affiliated with the Optimal Aging Center as a clinical consultant. So in today's webinar, we're reviewing the final session for the Coping with Blues behavioral activation approach that's taking materials from Oxford University Press's Treating Later Life Depression. And in our video right now, we're going to be outlining the components of the 8th and final session of behavioral activation. I'll be walking through the learn and practice forms and making some recommendations for implementation. I'll be offering some of those repeated reminders to help with session pacing and providing some troubleshooting tips and reminders of where to find things in the clinician's guide. So session 8 is held after the resident has participated in session 7. We're going to encourage you to continue on with session 8 content, even in cases in which there's been a delay between session 7 and session 8. So if a resident has been traveling, has been in a hospital, or had a health situation, you're just moving ahead with the material, because what you're going to see in this is that we are intentionally repeating core material and behavioral activation. There's certainly a couple bonus pages that we're providing for someone who's ready for additional content, but that there's a lot of intentional repetition, because that's really the work of behavioral activation, right? This isn't insight oriented of just, oh, I should do this, or suggestions. This is about building up those daily habits and that daily practice, and that takes repetition. So as you're beginning session 8, you're reminding the resident that this is the last session of the program. You'll be spending 10 to 15 minutes discussing the practice forms from the last session, walking through them, talking about what you've been learning together. We are going to encourage you to collect a new PHQ-9 score, or if there's a different depression assessment that's being used in the program, complete a final version of that depression assessment. You're providing the single staple packet for session 8 with a time spent on the bonus session material in session only for those high functioning clients who are really right there in the program, highly engaged and looking for activities and more ideas. Otherwise, you're just pointing out those bonus pages as an additional resource if they care to look at them. As always, we're having you spend in session time helping, guiding and coaching the resident through writing material down while you're there. And then what's an important part for session 8 is that you're expecting to devote more time in the session to problem solving, to troubleshooting, what's getting in the way of those positive activities that have been identified and that have been planned, but that the individual isn't following through on them. What do we need to do? Do we need to change the activity in some way? Do we need to change the approach that we're taking to scheduling it? You're going to be focusing on increasing the positive, even in the face of challenging and stressful life circumstances. And so we're resisting the urge to really problem solve and troubleshoot difficult life circumstances. And certainly, since this is the last session in the program, you're going to be wanting to watch the clock to allow some time at the end for that wrap up, to express your appreciation for the time, for the gift of their presence, for their openness and sharing their life with you. You're going to be commenting on areas of progress and encouraging the continued effort, that although this program and your meetings are going to be over, you certainly don't expect their activities to end, that you really want to be encouraging them to continue to engage in these positive activities that they've identified, and then an opportunity to say goodbye. A reminder of the setting. We've been talking about this from session to session. So this is just a reminder that even in the session 8, when all possible, you're sitting across in a corner seated situation at a table when at all possible. And then here are those components to behavioral activation that we've talked about in the previous orientation videos, and that especially in the session 8, we are really spending additional time on that 5th element, on that issue of problem solving, some very concrete and detailed plans for how to increase the positive activities over time. So in session 8, as you see for the goals, as I mentioned, you'll be doing some depression assessment, either using the PHQ-9 or another depression measure, if that's what's been selected. You're continuing to build on that list of positive activities. So you see do for practice listed there, that's a evolving, people are learning something about what is and isn't positive, about what is, and you're coming up with some new suggestions. So that list of positive activities in do 4 is continuing to be built upon. Then they're continuing to use the positive activities log. And you're providing additional copies of that for them to use where they're planning and scheduling, and that you're especially spending time in the session problem solving. And then, as I indicated, you're going to be wrapping up the program and saying goodbye. So I'll be walking through now some of those specific forms. So here's that do 4 practice. And as I indicated in sessions 6 and 7, some of what's happening as they then have a new clean copy and they're copying over from previous versions of the form onto this version, there might be some fine tuning that's happening and some additional ideas that are coming up over the past couple of weeks. So this is something that's continuing to build upon itself. Then in do 14 learn, we're then talking about how the positive activities log can be so helpful, that the value in doing that, as we have looked at and talked about Tyrone's example, is that it provides an opportunity to both schedule in advance. So that's that part of building agency and a sense of mastery, not just that, oh, I just wake up and I see what I feel like doing. That doesn't work with depression. This is about proactively planning in advance and then doing some things even when in the moment you actually don't feel like doing them. Sometimes what helps us after the fact. And so this is behavioral activation is premised on that motivation builds as a consequence of activity sometime, as opposed to motivation needing to be there in advance. And so that's, talking through an example for Tyrone can kind of help create some distance and some perspective that then can be applied to the resident's own life. So here's that do 5 practice form that, again, you're going to be encouraging them to continue to use after the program's over in the future. And that opportunity to get them started while you're together. Again, if today is Tuesday, you could write down Tuesday for day 1 and say, well, what do you want to be scheduling even for the rest of today? And now let's look from your list of activities. Let's now repeat and record them onto this form. And now let's write in day 2, day 3, day 4. That's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You can insert, the days of the week that are there. And then what are your sets? You're helping them in session do some of that scheduling with the slash. And then if you're meeting on a Tuesday and it's towards the end of the morning, you can say, well, what have you already done today that you might want to put down and put an X next to? So the bonus forms are particularly helpful, as I indicated, for clients who really get the premise and who've been engaged. This is reminding of the opportunity to really tie in their planned activities to what gives them meaning and purpose in life, and using that Start 5 practice form that was done at the very, very beginning of the program, and encouraging them to look back at that to develop some ideas. And then also we have some additional attention to the value of physical activity and ways in which they may want to continue to build in physical activity, because it's so important for mood, for our emotional lives, for our physical lives, for our brain health. There are just so many things that some form of physical activity, again, not what's impossible, but what's possible, even given your life circumstances and any limitations that you may have. And so bonus 13 Learn is another way of helping with that work and that particular emphasis on physical activity. So we've talked about the value of prioritizing both physical activity and activities that are either engaged with others or that lead to a sense of connection with others. And there are some solo activities that can still help create that sense of community, sense of contributing to a group of individuals beyond myself. Baking and cooking for someone else and then sharing that with them. There's a variety of things that may be done by themselves, but then provides that sense of social connectedness. So as we're working in this final session, as I indicated, a fair amount of time is spent problem solving and troubleshooting what's getting in the way. And so what activities may we need to substitute, do some more fine tuning, and how can we engage other people in their lives to help either with shared activities or to reinforce this program of behavioral activation in their life. So we've talked about the value in looking for activities that have been infrequent, but positive when they have happened. We're still staying away from using extensive session time to problem solve negative and upsetting situations. And we're looking for ways to modify what's been helpful and rewarding and enjoyable in the past, but that what has been infrequent due to a range of different life circumstances. So it's, not unusual for residents to, in a final session, bring up a brand new problem, a brand new life circumstance, and you're like, oh, what am I going to do? This was intended to be the last session, but this feels like something really, really big. What do I do with that? So what we're recommending is that you first start with that strengths-based perspective as they're relaying some new circumstance in their life that feels like a sudden shift to them. You're looking in their description for signs of effective coping strategies, and you're just commenting on, oh my goodness, I am so sorry that that's going on. And I can hear how stressful that is. But I also hear, as you're describing it, that you're also doing a number of things already to really help support yourself and manage this situation. So you're looking for signs of effective coping strategies and commenting on that. And then if they are really pulling for you to engage in problem solving, you're then asking them for, what does this remind you of in previous points in your life? And what have you done in that situation? And, try that approach out in the situation as well. And then just to remember that for everyone, generalizing skills from what they did from old problems to new problems can be challenging, but that all older adults have experiences of difficult times in life that they've gotten through, that they've survived, and that they have sometimes learned something out of. So we're helping them call upon previous situations and how can they apply those to this situation. So because this is the 8th session, resist the temptation to have this feel like the same as all the previous sessions, and resist the temptation to schedule additional sessions without consultation. So even if somebody's pulling for, there's so much going on and I'm not sure what to do, rather than scheduling a return visit right away, consider a phone check-in. Instead of another visit, and saying like, I understand that life really feels up in the air right now. Why don't we do this? Would you feel comfortable with me giving you a call and seeing how things are going in 2 weeks to see whether if there's been a spike in distress, whether if there had been some general improvement in depression, but right now in the last session, the depression scores are elevated in a way that hasn't been true for the past few sessions. You can do a phone check-in and perhaps a repeat evaluation of the PHQ-9 over the phone to see where things are at. And then certainly don't hesitate to consult with your clinical supervisor on specific concerns and situations for any given resident. We provide that webinar series on behavioral activation in session 3 of the culturally responsive CBT with older adults that was offered through the E4 Center. And I've provided the website there as a reminder. And just, a general reminder that we spend quite a bit of attention in the clinician guide for treating later life depression, focused on that skills for doing module of the Treating Later Life Depression workbook, specifically on behavioral activation. So there's a whole chapter in the clinician's guide that's really devoted to behavioral activation, with additional tips and information. We've got those tip sheets that are provided from the Optimal Aging Center that you're welcome to look at, to review, to remind you of some general procedures, especially some of those within session strategies that are going to be valuable for you. And with that, we are done with the overview of session 8, which is the final session of the Coping with Blues program. And I'm looking forward to the conversations that we're going to have with all of the Laguna Woods Village clinicians.